So this video is to help pupils thinking about their Edexcel Drama GCSE written exam, which is component 3, section A, looking at the Crucible. The important thing to bear in mind with this video is that this video will cover part of the exam. The whole exam is 1 hour and 45 minutes. If you get extra time, it will be 2 hours and 11 minutes. Section A has 5 questions on the Crucible, and section B has 2 questions on live theatre. This video is just going to look at section A, where you select the play The Crucible, which we've studied, and you answer the 5 questions. There is another video that will look on the live theatre section, which is section B. So, top tips for section A. So this video is just going to cover 3 key points: using quotes, reading the questions, and what does staging mean? These are probably the 3 most common misconceptions. So first off, let's look at using quotes in your answers. It's important to understand that you are given an extract in the exam, and you need to use this as the basis for all your answers. The extract isn't put there by random. It's not put there randomly. It's chosen specifically by the exam board, and you need to use it as the basis for all your questions. That means you need to refer to it in your answer. And the best way to do that is to use quotes. So let's have a look at an example question. So this is an example question, the first question of the exam, and it's looking at an extract in Act 2. And the question would be something like, you are going to play Elizabeth Proctor. Give 2 ways in which you would use vocal skills in this extract. Here is an example answer. I would make Elizabeth seem uncertain, so that she hesitates before speaking. This would show that she doesn't want to upset John. Now, there's nothing wrong in that as part of your answer. Obviously, the question's looking for 2 ways, and this is giving 1. Pause for effect of the school bell. So this is just giving 1 way rather than 2. However, where is this from? What bit of the extract does this refer to? This answer hasn't shown that, so it's not going to get very many marks. Adding this sentence makes this a really strong part of your answer. So here it says, I would make Elizabeth seem uncertain so that she hesitates before speaking. When she says, John, grant me this, I would have her pause and then speak softly. This would show that she doesn't want to upset John. And what this has done here is it's linked specifically to the extract. It's given a quote from the extract. And what this does for the examiner is it tells them exactly the point in the extract that this is going to happen. And that is what is missing when you don't use quotes. It's really, really important that you do use quotes in your answer. Otherwise, you are going to lose marks. So I've been very subtle about this. Every single question on the Crucible expects you to refer to the extract. You cannot do this unless you use quotes. So quotes are key. You need to use quotes in every single one of your responses. Tip 2, reading the questions. Okay, so let's think about section A in the exam. There are 5 questions. The first 2, you've got a 4-mark question and a 6-mark question, and they are both looking at a performer focus. So they will say that you are playing this part, and then what would you do as a performer? The second 2 questions, your 9-mark and your 12-mark question, have a director focus. So one of these questions will look in terms of the direction of a specific actor, And the other one will look in terms of the direction of a kind of key production element in the play. And then question C, which is 14 marks. Now, this question has a designer focus. So it will ask you for specific ideas for design, again, to do with the extract. Now, reading the questions is key. If you don't read what the question is asking you to do, you don't get the marks. And I know that sounds incredibly obvious, but under exam conditions, when people panic and they stress, they don't read properly. The first two questions are very clear and very specific. In order to get your 4 marks for your performance focus, you need to give 2 examples and 2 explanations. So you'll give an example, link it to a quote, and then you'll give an explanation as to why you would do this. The second question, the 6-mark question, 3 examples, 3 explanations. Again, you give your example, you link it to a quote, and you give an explanation. These questions will probably ask you to look at vocal technique, or they might ask you to look at physical technique or physical skill, or they might ask you to look at performance skills, which is both physical and vocal. You need to read the question and see what it's asking you specifically for. Question B1 and question B2, so the 9 and the 12-mark question, these tend to be the ones where pupils lose marks because they don't read. Question 9 is a director focus, but it'll ask you to look at production elements and choose one of them. So you write about that production element to do with the extract, whether that is lighting, or whether that is set, or whether that is costume, or whatever it is. But it also asks you to link to context. And context in this exam means the time that the play was written, not the time that the play was set. And that is really important. So if you are writing about the Crucible, you need to link it to the idea of McCarthyism or the idea of mass hysteria as a result of McCarthyism. You need to link to the idea of what was going on in the US in 1953. It is not asking you to link to the idea of being a Puritan. Okay, context means the time the play was written. For your 12-mark question, direct focus, it'll ask you to focus on one particular character, and you will need to consider all 3 bullet points and the complete play. Now, the best way to do this, because it will focus on a character, is to think how that character has changed or how that character changes. So if, for example, your bullet points are to do with looking at stage directions, looking at voice, and looking at physicality for one particular character, you might make a really good point of contrast about how that's different from another point in the play. So, for example, if you had a question to do with the character of John Proctor, and the extract was in Act 2, when he's talking to his wife, Elizabeth, you might make a contrast in terms of physical portrayal of that character with Act 4, where by which point he's in jail and he has been tortured and he is really kind of quite cowed. He's quite despondent because they almost persuade him to sign the confession. So think about, for the complete play, think about the character they're asking and think about a point in the play where there's a contrast that you can make reference to, and then you can write something like this contrasts with whatever point in the play where this character, whatever, okay? It is really important. More candidates lose marks on these questions because they don't write about context, or they don't write about the complete play. And what that means in terms of your marks is your marks will probably move down a band. So it's really important that you do reference what they're asking you to do in the question. Here's an example of a 9-mark question and a 12-mark question. So you can see here it says one of the production elements. You've got 3 production elements there, and it says you should refer to context in which the text was created and first performed. So if we're looking at the Crucible, that's 1953. And you can write about the way in which it's received by the audience if you can link it to one of these ideas. Okay, but again, we're focusing on the extract. So if you're writing about lighting, you're going to link to a specific line in the play where the lighting would change and say why. Or if you're writing about the props and stage furniture, you'll link that to the extract and say what happens with them at those particular points. Similarly for set. For the second question, the 12-mark question, you can see here it's looking at a performer. It wants you to consider all these things, but it also says and in the complete play. So again, think about one of these aspects and how it links to another point in the play for whichever character they've given you. So, in terms of reading the questions, the last one, your 14-mark question, that's a designer focus, and that will give you 3 design elements for you to look at. So again, that might be set, it might be staging, it might be costume, it might be lighting. And you need to write about how you will bring the extract to life and link it to that design. So you need to have very clear ideas about the design for your production, but you need to be able to link it to the extract they've given you. Again, that's really, really important. Right, last pointer. What does staging mean? Now, staging might come up in several of your questions, and this is a point that candidates get confused about. Staging might be referred to in your 9-mark question or the 14-mark question, and then it's a design idea. If it's referred to in your 12-mark question and it's linked to a character, then you can think about stage directions and where the character is in relation to other characters. So, for example, proxemics. But if the question is for, if they refer to staging for your 9-mark question or your 14-mark question, then it's more of a design focus. And proxemics isn't design. Proxemics is where actors stand in relation to each other on the set. And that's very much more direction. Have a look at what the exam board have said. So, questions that ask students to consider the use of stage space were principally designed as blocking or proxemics or movement questions. So questions that look at characters, actors, and how they perform. While questions focusing on staging were intended to be design questions, considering entrances and exits, awareness of audience, and creating an appropriate space for performers and audience. So, if staging is a chosen element for B1 or question C, B1 is your 9-mark question where it asks you to focus on a particular production element. C is the 14-mark question where it asks you to focus on a design idea. So if staging is for these questions, responses must have a design or production element focus to meet the criteria fully. If you talk about where actors move and stand, that isn't design. So if you are writing about staging for your 9-mark question or for your 14-mark question, you need to think about your stage space. Is it proscenium arch? Is it theatre in the round? Is it thrust? Think about what's happening in the extract where characters enter and exit? Where do they come from and where do they go to? And what will be the impact on the audience? So it's that idea of how the performance space is used to have an impact on the audience rather than thinking about individual actors in that way. If it's B2, where the students are asked to respond to all 3 bullet points in the direction of an actor, if the 3rd bullet point says stage space and stage directions, then you can talk about proxemics, blocking and movement. Okay, so if you're asked to look at staging, that will normally be for design, and you think about the stage space and you think about where the exits and the entrances are on that stage, and you think about how the staging at that point in the play is important. So how your use of proscenium march or your use of thrust or theatre in the round or whatever is important. For the 12-mark question, if you're writing about a particular actor, a particular character, then stage space and stage directions are to do with the way that character moves. Okay. I think I've said enough about that. Right, so those are your 3 top tips. So for section A, remember, please, important to use quotes, important to read what the questions say, and please remember what the concept of staging actually means. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Best of luck with your exam.